Conservative elements declared in the 70s society was becoming ungovernable due to democratic surge. What do you think about that, folks? I can't get over this idea that like the Trilateral Commission, Sam fucking Huntington, society is ungovernable because of a surge of democracy with the new social movements of the 60s and 70s.
You want too much. You want too much, guys.
You
You want too
little
much. Stop it. We're trying to just put everything in boxes.
naughty.
Yeah. Stop. Like, we give you an inch and you take a mile.
We got to tamp you down.
Exactly.
We got to cut off your toes so it hurts when you run. Yeah. And the traditional left, Mouffe argues, in that situation failed to capitalize on incorporating these new social movements because it was still obsessed with class politics and allowed for, as we've already mentioned, the cultural programs of Thatcher and Reagan to institute a new common sense and a new politics and institute their heinous ideology and to attain a hegemonic status. A cultural and ideological victory, because the left. Well, actually, in this pre-moment, at the very tail end of social democracy, it's not the left. It was the left failed to adapt to the changing field from in respect to Mouffe's postmodern outlook.
Sure.
This hegemonic project attacked social democracy's common sense, as I mentioned. It was instituted as hegemonic with New Labour in '97, failing to challenge neoliberalism, and the left allowed social democracy to become social liberalism. In that social liberalism is the moment where the left left the left, which is now in crisis. Popular movement on multiple fronts doesn't need a radical break. Thatcher didn't need a radical break. So this is an interesting point that she makes. Thatcher didn't need a radical break, so we don't need a radical break. We can use the political. We can ride the wave of the return of the political. We can mount a counter or a multi-hegemonic strategy because we're countering an old hegemony and we're ensuring another one doesn't institute itself. We can do all this, and hypothetically we can sort of say something like Corbyn again and Sanders here, get there and start democratizing to a sort of a small degree probably the economy. Actually, that did seem to be the focus, but no doubt that the sort of the democratizing of new social movements that's already underway will continue and maybe even accelerate. There'll be a hell of a lot more space for people to legitimize their particularities than in the last couple of years under Trump and the xenophobic aspects and rhetorics of Brexit, at the very least. So there you have a sort of a platform for pushing the Overton window back and determining a new centre, a new common sense, and a new horizon to achieve, and a new sort of wake to recede from. That's the sort of the ideal, I guess. And this doesn't need a radical break, is her point, because when Thatcher instituted neoliberalism, there was no revolution. It was revolutionary, but there was no rupture. So, is that possible? Is it enough for the left to model Thatcher's revolution, to institute hegemony, initially with the first left instance of not neoliberalism, and as a counter moment to the imminence of the far right? It's certainly enough to ensure the far right doesn't get back into office. That's obviously fantastic, but is it enough to is it a point where we can work for more radical change, or,
Mm.
or will it lead to a stabilization of the status quo, and the rich will somehow manage to avoid any major upset, any major redistributive programs? I don't know.
Mm.
Because I think Zizek would say, like, are we wasting our time with a hegemonic project? Should we just be focusing on spearheading toward a radical break through revolution? Because there's a chance that a hegemonic project necessitates a lack of radicalism.
Sure, we find a consensus, I suppose, with the centre so as to keep the fascists out, but then fail to push past, I guess, the deeply entrenched centre consensus that I guess we comfortably exist within, I suppose. So yeah, failing, I
Something.
guess, the idea that failing the efforts of both the left and the centre, it I guess relinquishes the opportunity, perhaps, if we're merely focused on just making sure the fascists aren't there, and then we can carry on.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that is that's almost a separate question. I think, like, it should at the moment or maybe it's not separate because, or maybe it is, the imminence of the far right is again something that, yeah, that's basically what you just said. Something that the left and the center. When we say center here, we do mean the right, don't we? It's the conservative element of society.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, wouldn't be referring to the like center left, so to speak. It'd be
I mean, they're pretty conservative.
Well,
The
yeah,
left. That's the whole,
two as well, I suppose. Yeah,
the whole point. Sorry, what I'm saying there is, like,
the center swap.
I think what people should, like, to simplify this, I think people should, when they're saying the center, should consider that the right, just not the far right. It is essentially conservative, rather it's left center or right center, under neoliberalism. So I mean, obviously, because there's the argument that neoliberalism is economic and it's not left or right, but actually it's implemented by, like, its effect is conservation of the status quo, despite its radical implementation and its radical effects on society. Like, it was revolutionary. It accelerated the return of previous conservative social hierarchical organizations, and effectively subdued the progressive democratic, which we were just talking about, trends in the last century. So I mean, it's the right wing, like, it's just not the far right. I think we should feel legitimate. We should be able to say that legitimately now. So leaving that question hanging there, the other question. So disregarding the imminence of the far right, will a hegemonic project be enough? Is overturning neoliberalism enough? Is like doing Thatcher but on the left enough? I don't know. Depends on whether you want a far left society or not, I guess. How far left you want it? What the hell? I mean, like, how
and again,
far?
I think.
Go on.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
I was just going to say, I mean, does that actually mean, would that eventually become the negation of difference that Mouffe was actually talking about, and saying the chain of equivalence doesn't negate difference? If you were to, I suppose, push for a far left society, could that eventually lead to a negation of the difference?
I don't believe so.
No,
I don't think so.
I mean, maybe that's a very extreme kind of idea that I'm posing there.
I think we touched
short-sighted.
No, because, well, unless you're saying yes. I mean, like, yeah, there's plenty of opportunity for that to be the case, and that's exactly what like she's arguing against. But I don't think necessarily. I think, and I can't remember this come up in the last chat, but sort of my issue with her is the idea that we can escape the form of individualism that has developed organically over to this point in the last 200-300 years or whatever. Can we rearticulate a definition of, and this is a different, well, kind of a different shade on that question. You know, if we want to maintain elements of liberalism, of individual freedoms, which I think yes is the sort of general answer it's going to be. Can we reconceive of the individual in a way distinct to what we have today? So in terms of the different stages, in terms of the modern individual, in terms of the sort of the fade in of the sort of far more possessive individualist, the return of the sort of liberal elite of pre-war era, the Thatcher individual, the brutal, anarchic situation. We're now finding ourselves in the dissolution of communities, the inability of them for them to look after themselves, to support themselves, and the competitive economic conditions that are being foisted upon people in order for them to ever hope to sort of support themselves, whether as on an individual level or a community level, to the sort of the positive, the more healthy and more able side of that, the liberal elite itself, the sort of young, happy people who, you know, sort of have enough money and partake in enough sort of decadence to feel that life isn't too serious and there isn't sort of all that meaning in the world, and, you know, the narcissism that sort of breeds from that, the irony and dispassion of the sort of the hipster and millennial generation, the hyper liberalism, the total focus on identity. So, like, you know, there's 3 stages of the individual. If you're seeing that in historic context and determining that it's an organic enough development, of course there's been interventions, but were those interventions organic also? Doesn't matter. It's not to make a teleological argument, but just for the sake of, because it's a historic instance, that's an organic development of the individual. Can we redefine the coordinates of freedom and equality through a hegemonic articulation of the left that will overcome or transcend this form, this vision of what the individual is and can be and ought to be, and the branches from that philosophy, where that might lead in the future. Like, okay, so in this book, Mouffe is even saying, I've said this before, I'm sure, that we've neglected the class politics. You know, we've tended to defending the liberal aspect of our society for too long. And okay, so the overdetermination of liberalism in liberal democracy is one thing. Even if we got a democratic overdetermination in our society once more, where would that leave people's sense of self and sense of the collective, considering what it is today? So, like, and I think I did bring this up before again as well, I'm pretty sure, like, the Enlightenment project is an extrication of the individual human body from the lumpen subjugation of history, of say, like, religious forces, monarchical forces, the aristocracy, the brutal elites of the past. You know, I conceive myself an individual. I want that freedom. So that's the Enlightenment project, or a way of describing it. in an essential sense, one essential sense out of many, I'm sure. Um, so, and Marx is part of that project. I'm pretty sure he has a vision of the individual as well. It's just an entirely different one to the one we have today. Oh, the one that seemed there is no one that we have today, but the way it's enacted in a macro sense, how it's manifesting, and yeah, and I just wonder, is a revolutionary break necessary to sort of to regress to a point where we can readdress this and sort of begin instituting a different way of seeing the self or sensing the self, or again, can we do a true hegemonic articulation within the system that we have at the moment?